FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler is joining us. We're very honored to have him here. Please give him a huge round of applause, as well as Alex Wilhelm, our moderator.
It's a little blue in here, I feel.
You know?
Oh, actually, it matches your coat, actually.
I like your jacket. It's
Thank you.
really nicely done.
You look fantastic, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, you know.
You're just a handsome, handsome man.
Happy to be here, Alex.
Thank you for coming. Welcome to the yearly, the pink socks, if you want to take a look. There you go. Welcome to the yearly gathering of the nerds. It's very nice to have you.
It's only the New York nerds.
No, something flying for this, actually. There we go. You took a train.
Traveling nerds, okay.
Nerds on bikes, actually, I think they call it. It's like a Postmate. All right. Before we get to net neutrality, and we're going to do a lot on that, recent news. The proposed Comcast Time Warner cable deal, $45 billion, is done.
Correct.
And today in its earnings, Comcast reported a $99 million charge related to the transaction that then failed. So I want to ask, were you surprised when Comcast decided to drop the ball on this and walk away from it?
No, I think it was a pretty responsible decision by Brian Roberts. And you know, what he said when he said it's time to move on, I think perfectly encapsulates the reality. You know, why go and fight this through the courts or whatever the case may be? Let's keep looking towards the future. And I think that's one of the things.
But would it have worked? Do you think they would have pulled the deal off if they hadn't dropped it? Or do you think they just knew that they were doomed and it was not going to work?
Well, I'm not going to, I don't know what they thought.
Well,
what I think is it was a really good decision. It was a good decision, one, because it would be a long, drawn-out process to challenge our decision.
Right.
And two, because of the whole attitude of it's time to move on. Let's look for the next thing. This is an industry that is going like this.
Right.
Why do you want to keep fighting that fight?
Well, on that point, do you think this is going to be kind of a poison pill for future large combinations of this sort? Or do you think we'll still see proposed deals in the space of similar size?
I think we will look at each of them on the merits. I mean, one of the things that was really key about the Comcast review was that it was incredibly data-driven. I mean, as you know, 14 months this lasted. An awful lot of economic data, an awful lot of market data, an awful lot of data inside how the industry operates, and I think that's how you want to make decisions. You want to have them data-driven.
Do you think the average consumer in America would have been harmed if the deal had been allowed to execute?
So our concern was that it was not in the public interest to do this.
To define the public interest in this case.
Well, we have there's a broad definition of the public interest, and that is, will the market continue to operate? And the market is both the cable op market and the broadband market. What's the impact on the future of video and video competition? What's the future on cable rates? And then you say, okay, are there offsetting public benefits? And we came to the conclusion, no.
So it would have been a net harm given a reduced competitive environment for the average consumer.
That's what we said.
When you view competition, is that the main lens you look at deals through? Or do you have other favorite parameters which you can kind of vet these large transactions?
Well, it's interesting. Clearly, competition is a key component of what is in the public interest. The Justice Department and we were going on parallel paths. They have very strict competition rules and decisions that they have to make. Ours is a little fuzzier in terms of what's the general public interest, and clearly competition is one of those issues.
Okay. Now we've done all that stuff, we can move on now to the actual issue that I want to talk to you about.
Just a warm-up?
That was the opening bit, if you will. That was the first act. All right. So one of the most surprising things during the net neutrality saga over the last year was the simply massive outpouring of public comment. And I'm just kind of curious, up front, were you surprised at the amount of comments that came in? And how early were you shocked by that? Like, what was the early point when you were like, oh man, this is bigger than most policy debates are here at the FCC?
Oh, I remember that there was a day early on when we had, 100,000, 150,000 kind of comments being filed, and you go, whoa, but that's why this debate, that's why this decision was so damn important, because what those 4 million people who were filing with us, and not all of them were pro. I mean, it was
mostly
divided.
pro.
It was about 3/4 were pro. Okay, but that still means there's 1 million people that didn't like the idea. Okay,
or 1 million theoretical people,
which is a non-trivial amount. But the point of the matter is that this proved the power of an open internet to free expression, and it just happened that the issue being decided and the ability to communicate using that technology happened to coincide.
So how does the FCC...
I don't think it's the end of what we'll see on that.
Okay, fine. But when you read these comments, how do they impact your actual rulemaking process? So what impact can the average citizen have by submitting a comment into the FCC, and how do you kind of measure that for how you do a rulemaking?
So obviously the total impact, the total number of comments is something that you have to sit up and take notice about. But this is not something where you make a decision based on bulk.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you could, but it'd be very stupid.
You could, but I'm not sure that that's what the statute had in mind. You know, we're supposed to go through and make a decision based upon the authorities in the statute in terms, again,
right,
what is in the public interest, and that's what we did.
So you were not personally swayed then in your own decision-making process by the comments themselves, but you did notice the bulk of them, roughly?
I think that the bulk of the comments indicated how when you're talking about the internet, you're talking about something very personal to people. And they then used that personal medium of theirs to express themselves. That was what was significant.
On the other side of this, over in Congress, Senator Franken called net neutrality the, quote, free speech issue of our time, whereas Senator Cruz, who is actually running for president, called net neutrality Obamacare for the internet. I don't get it either. But what I don't really understand, I was hoping you could tell us, is what drives this philosophical divide in Congress on this issue? Because I feel like people are really divided into two camps, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of room in between them. So among our Congress, why do you think we're seeing such a division on this very important issue?
You know, I mean, I think, Alex, I think that there is a reality in all policy debates that people bring their own experiences and their own ideological approach to the role of government to decision making. And those kinds of comments aren't surprising.
So you were not at all surprised when Ted Cruz said the Obamacare line?
No.
Complete unshock. I think you were the only one. So are you kind of pointing out to a digital divide between the FCC and Congress in terms of knowledge and competency on the issues that you deal with?
Oh, you know, I think that what the Congress did, as a matter of fact, I had an interesting discussion during the hearing on Thursday with a member of the House Communications Subcommittee on that issue, that what Congress does is Congress enacts broad principles and then delegates authority to an expert agency. And of course, there's a situation where somebody will come in and say, oh, that's not what I meant to do. That's not what I wanted you to do. But when you delegate to an expert agency, you're counting on the process that agency runs. And in fact, the courts have held what's called Chevron deference. It's based on a
Chevron deference.
On a Chevron. It's based on a Supreme Court case called the Chevron case, in which it says that the courts should give the expert agency deference when having to make decisions, because they are the expert agency.
But in this case, in the run-up to the actual vote on net neutrality, we saw Congress almost collectively losing its mind about what was going to happen, and in the wake of the vote, they're still proposing bills on net neutrality itself. So I'm kind of curious, if you're supposed to defer to you, why is Congress so violently reacting to you doing your job?
Well, they make the rules. They have the ability to do that. There's nothing untoward about that. They have the right to do it. My job is to take the statutes that Congress has passed, to look at the facts presented in the context of those statutes and make decisions. And if some people want to say, oh no, it's the wrong decision, or that's the right decision, that's entirely their right. And if they want to change the law, that's entirely their right. They are the Congress of the United States. They are the people's elected representatives. And but I hope that in this debate, what we recognize is that on June 12th, which is when the rules will take effect, on June 12th, there will be in place the strongest open internet protections that anyone has ever imagined, and we shouldn't be going backwards from them.
It's a good point. Okay, there we go. But maybe there's a number of legal challenges out there right now. I mean, how many people are suing you?
Oh golly, it's as of today, it's over a dozen.
Over a dozen. And did you, well done. Did you expect that number of challenges?
Sure. I mean, I said all along, I said the big dogs are going to sue. And I mean, again, there's nothing surprising in the kinds of things that we do. The big dogs will sue on things they don't like, and it's their right to.
You're too nice, I feel. Deference.
We have in place the most stringent and expensive open internet rules in history.
One of your lawyers, Gigi Sohn, said that the approach this time around was, quote, belt and suspenders, as in you're really legally protected on this.
Yeah.
Are you as confident as she is that you're going to be able to beat these lawsuits?
Yeah. And actually, when you say beat the lawsuits, there's a two-part process here. Long about July-ish, actually it'll probably get filed in the next 10 days, 2 weeks, there will be motions filed in the court to stay the order, to keep us from enforcing it. Probably that'll be decided in the July-ish kind of time frame by the court. And I'm confident that that we'll do well in that situation for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is there's a list of issues that the court has to use to decide on, and one is there irreparable harm to the plaintiffs, and two, is there a likelihood of proceeding of prevailing on the merits in the argument, and I think we'll be good there. So then we go to the actual argument itself before whichever appeals court, because right now there's several appeals courts that are contesting for it. And when you stop and think about the fact that the Verizon decision, which overturned the 2010 open internet rules, was basically based on the concept that the agency had imposed Title II common carrier kind of requirements without stepping up and saying you are a Title II common carrier.
And that's the core reason you think this time
we solved that. That issue's gone. That was the big issue last time. And the court sent that back to us on remand. Thank you. We have addressed that issue. So I feel pretty confident on the outcome of the court cases.
If you do lose, what's the next step? What's your short-term plan?
Not to lose. That's the short-term plan.
Just go ahead and cross off that. Delete. All right. Going back to the reform issue just for a second, there's a number of bills proposed right now in Congress to change how your agency operates, and you say that's okay. It's their right. Do you think what's being proposed by actually both parties?
I say what?
That it's their purview to.
Yeah, Congress makes
exactly
right.
Are the bills that are currently being proposed about disclosing rules and the voting process and so forth, do you think those would be conducive to the FCC working well, or do you think what's being proposed in Congress would actually harm the functioning of your agency?
Well, so what I testified last Thursday was that I had serious concerns that these proposals, which are described as transparency, actually are introduce delay. And
delay in the rulemaking process.
Delay in the FCC getting to a point where it can make decisions.
Okay.
and that the public interest is served by getting to decisions. And that we shouldn't be building roadblocks along the way that impact the ability for the FCC, for instance, to make the implementational decisions about the open internet. So what's going on here is, okay, there are specific things that the FCC has to look at, both during my tenure and in all the years to follow. And the question is, will there be the traditional kind of process, which is open, transparent, and somewhat rapid, okay?
That's your version of rapid?
But the point, that's my point. That's why I said somewhat, because the alternative is to slow it down even more. And so what we're talking about is, will the activities that are necessary to enforce the open internet rules be slowed down by the imposition of new processes that clog up the existing administrative process?
And your view is that these bills would do that right away?
That was what I said to Congress on Thursday.
And what was their response?
I think the Republicans weren't too happy with me.
You've been having that issue quite a lot lately, actually, with Republicans on the Hill. They dragged you through, was it 5 hearings in 8 working days after the vote?
Yes.
How fun was that?
I think you know the answer to that.
I do. Actually, I have a different question on that. Do you think those hearings were at all useful? Do you think they actually accomplished anything? Or were they essentially just political theater to chastise you for doing your job?
This is not my role to make that kind of decision. They say, Mr. Chairman, we want you to show up. I say, you're the Congress of the United States. I respect the Congress of the United States. I will show up, and I'll be happy.
You respect the Congress of the United States?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Holy shit. All right. You're the guy who says yes on that poll. Okay. Now, we only have a few minutes, and I wanted to get to a different topic. You were in venture capital for about 10 years,
yes,
right? So you watched the tech scene as a whole. And one of the questions we're always talking about among ourselves is, are we in a bubble? Are valuations out of control? Is it a risk bubble? Is it a valuation bubble? So I'm kind of curious, from your perspective as a former venture capitalist, how overvalued do you think tech is right now?
So you have a conclusion in your question.
This is how I do interviews, Tom.
This is, you know.
In this case, I'm Congress and you're still the FCC.
I hung up my spurs on that, Alex. Well, when I took the oath of office, I stepped out of that world. So all I know is what I read in TechCrunch.
Oh, good. Actually, or not good. I can't really decide. Okay, then. So once you're done with this job, once you hang up your spurs for the next time, are you going to go back to VC?
I have no idea. I truly don't. I mean, you know, so I'm not exactly a spring chicken. Maybe, I don't know if you've noticed this.
You're 69, right?
I'm 69, so I'll be 71 when I leave this job. So, you know, I may just play with the grandkids.
Would you be open to being the chairman for the next president?
She hasn't asked me.
Okay. See, that's popular. That's popular. All right, fine. If you want to do it that way. So not going back to VC, fair enough. You used to work as a lobbyist for both the cable and the wireless industries. Yep. So given that you've made a lot of non-friends in those sectors recently, I'm kind of curious, do your old friends call you up and ask you if you've lost your mind?
They used to call me up and ask me that question back in the old days.
Back in their pain. No, I'm serious. I mean, I feel like for a lot of people, when you came into this job, we expected you to act in a certain way given your past employment, and you've really turned that on its head, and I think you've surprised a lot of people.
You know, Alex, when I was an advocate for the cable industry and the wireless industry, there were a couple of things that were important. One, they were nascent industries. I was in cable 30 years ago, okay?
I was -5.
Okay, there you go. And the wireless industry was, you know, over a dozen years ago that I left. And they were very different businesses. They were the ones coming up the side of the hills, and we were the side of the hill, and we were fighting to stay alive. That having been said, I was an advocate for these new innovative services, and I hope I was a good
Is advocate a fancy word for lobbyist?
Sure.
Okay.
I was a lobbyist for these, and I hope that I was a good advocate for them. But I have a different assignment today. My client today is the American people. And I want to be the best damn advocate I possibly can be for the American people. And that's how I look at issues.
Okay, well, we'll bring you back next year then, and we'll see how the lawsuits play out and see if you were right.
I look forward to it.
Thanks for coming, Tom.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.